Hello. In this video, I'd like to talk about why I stepped away from the 12-step movement. So in October 2007, I first stepped into an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and kind of a cliche, but it saved my life. Not in the literal sense, but certainly saved me from a slow soul death. At that time, I was a binge alcoholic. I was drinking 4 or 5 nights a week, heavily, and my life was just becoming progressively hollower and narrower. I was functioning, I could still go to work, but beyond working and maintaining a few friendships with drinking buddies, I didn't have much of a life. And I knew that if I wanted to achieve my dreams in terms of business, in terms of family, I was never going to do that as an alcoholic. And in those early days of AA, I found the incredible support and warmth offered by everybody in those rooms to be invaluable. I did the 90 meetings in 90 days, which is commonly encouraged for people first coming into a 12-step program. And that helped me out enormously. I had a sponsor, so like a mentor who was always there at the end of the phone. I had other people I could call if ever I was in a tight spot. Maybe I was out with old drinking friends and felt awkward and uncomfortable. I could call them up. It was just brilliant. I made a ton of friends really quickly. I got a stable life on all of this time you get back from not drinking anymore. I had places to go. There's a whole social network associated with it. I used to love hanging out in cafes, and that the whole experience of being in that community was wonderful. And I took on blind faith the tenets of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is we're powerless over alcohol. This is a disease, and it's incurable. Yeah, I certainly accepted that I didn't have any power over alcohol. I tried to give up several times. I tried to moderate my drinking and had failed every time. So I knew I was powerless. I accepted that, and I just just took it that this was a disease. It was incurable. I was always going to be an alcoholic. I didn't really think too much about it. I just took that on and thought, this is somewhere I can get sober. This is going to help me get off the drink, and that's what I want. So I'm going to go with it. And perhaps for the first year or so, I didn't question any of it. I just let my feet do the thinking, as they say. I'd just show up to meetings, not do a great deal of self reflection. I followed the steps, which is very action oriented, making amends to people who've wronged, and there was plenty of that. Plenty of people I needed to make amends to. I threw myself into it and ended up joining 3 different 12-step groups because once I accepted the alcoholism, I then was able to acknowledge it, my other addictions. Yeah, and I suppose after maybe a couple of years in the rooms, I was starting to ask the question, why did I drink? Why did I drink so heavily? And it was about this time that I was recommended a book called Homecoming by John Bradshaw. It's a classic self-help book and focuses on getting in touch with our inner child and connecting to the early experiences in my life. What did little Richard experience all through my childhood? And there's a bunch of exercises in the book which I did and started to touch into the pain of my early life. Ultimately found a therapist who worked in the John Bradshaw homecoming paradigm, found that to be hugely valuable, and over a period of time came to recognize that there was a reason I drank. And the reason was unresolved childhood and ultimately pain emanating from my birth. I know that may sound far-fetched to some people, but that's the conclusion I came to, that I had a lot of unresolved trauma, and the way that I dealt with pain coming up from me being triggered in life into that early trauma was to drink and to use other means to escape my feelings, which all presented as addictions. And I came to, and I heard this very recently, but I came to be asking the question, not so much why did I drink, but why the pain? I recognized that it was pain driving my addictions. And so a more instructive question was why the pain? Why am I in this pain? Why? And then why do I need to drink or, do the sexual stuff or whatever else it might be? And for a long period, then I continued with the two in parallel. So I was going to the meetings and I was also doing a ton of an inner work. And the more inner work I did, the less compulsive I became. And that started to have me question this premise that I have an incurable disease or I have an incurable set of diseases. And Dr. France Janoff, who is the wife of the late Arthur Janoff, who wrote the book Primal Scream, which had a huge influence on his work in general had a huge influence on my recovery. She had this metaphor that dealing with our buried pain is like emptying a bathtub with a teaspoon. And I completely related to that. It's painstaking work. It takes a long time, but it is possible. It is possible to empty a bathtub with a teaspoon. And as far as I'm concerned, that means that addictions are curable. We do have the ability to relieve the pain that's within us, to excise the pain from our bodies. And I've more recently come to discover other techniques that may equate more to having a ladle or a bucket than a teaspoon. But ultimately, that idea that we can cure ourselves, we can heal ourselves, uh, is one that I came to believe. And that put me on a collision with the principles within the 12 step philosophy, and something had to give. And ultimately, I left the 12 step program several years ago and I haven't looked back. I haven't needed to go back to the rooms. I've continued to do my inner work. And the more I do of my inner work, the less and less compulsive I get. And now I'm at the point where just really don't relate to myself as being an addict in any meaningful way. I certainly still have compulsions. Occasionally dip my toe into certain activities. And I'm addicted to coffee. I'm definitely addicted to technology. It's not like I've removed all addictions from my life, but I am largely cured, I would say, of my major addictions. And yeah, I just don't believe that alcoholism or any other ism is incurable. I don't believe it's a disease in the way that we think about disease. It's a disease in terms of us not being at ease with ourselves, but that's resolvable, that's curable over time with persistence. And that's really the message of this video, is that we are extraordinary beings capable of self-healing, capable of curing ourselves from perhaps anything. It's a question of following our intuition. It's a question of facing whatever we need to face. We need to do the work. Healing, we call it healing work for a reason. And we're extraordinary people, all of us. We can heal ourselves. That's the message. That's the message. I don't know if anybody needs to hear that. Perhaps I need to hear that. But it's what I've come to believe. So hugely grateful for everything that all of those meetings offered me. They're doing great work. They're helping people all over the world. And I believe there's a fatal flaw in their philosophy. And, and that is that we can self-heal. And there is a reason for our addictions. And we can get to that reason and we can resolve it. I hope that's useful. I hope that's inspiring. You are your own solution. You can heal yourself.